dozen, but when the lights started coming on, I thought, okay, it's not that I can sit down now and play that, but at least I understand musically what he's doing, or basically, where he's coming from.
So you're not. So you got to the point where you weren't just copying or mimicking. You were actually.
Well, I never tried to copy or mimic him, because really I don't think if I could.
Yeah.
It's so good. I got into the story about Alan, and he is one of my main influences as a guitar player since I've. But I never sat down and tried to work out any of his lyrics. I mean, or any of his licks, I should say. But I told him, somebody asked me in front of him one time, they said, well, what do you get out of watching him? I said, I'll tell you what I get. I take away the fire. I try to, because he never stops. He's just high energy all the time.
Right.
And he does not come down off of that.
Right.
He just, so intense. And I thought, I started applying that. I started applying that to my plan. Yeah, I said, I'm going to put that fire into my plan and keep it there. I mean, I had it, some of it, a little bit of it. I had enough of it that I understood what it was about.
Yeah.
But it really made a difference.
Well, that's interesting. I mean, it's one thing to know the music and know how to play a song, but that's what takes it.
Yeah, so I never ever played any of his individual licks, even though I worked with him a dozen times. I never even sat down and tried to. I would listen to his stuff, and just absorb it, and that both live. Because one thing about sitting that close to in a concert situation, because it wasn't a laid back jazz thing. They were high energy, playing through big amps and loud.
Yeah.
It was very loud, and so me sitting there, I felt everything that all the guys in the band played. So it was like being in the middle of the band, just not playing.
Yeah, yeah.
And that was really good. That helped me a lot.
Yeah, yeah.
So, I must admit. But but back to this, why I started that story was that George Benson was at this concert club that served food with us, and he was there with his wife. And he said, he was eating, and he didn't know who Alan Holdsworth was, but Alan was setting up to play that night. So
and where was this?
Like doing the sound check. It was in New York.
Okay.
So Alan picks up his guitar and turns his amp on and starts wailing. And George Benson, now I met George Benson one time. I never worked with him, but I met him, just went to see him, and he was very nice, laid back man, and he was just super nice guy. But like when I shook his hand, I said, I'm never going to wash this hand again, George. And he said, oh, do you play? Well, I said, I thought I did.
Right.
Until I heard you. But
he played at Chili's
a lot
of times.
Yeah, he did. And that's where I talked to him at one time, was when Chili's was over in that hotel on 4th Street.
Okay. Before they moved.
Yeah. Before they were, where they were at. And they were on Lawn Street there for a while too, but this was even before that. So, or it might have been after, might have been Lawn Street, then the hotel on 4th Street, and then, where 5th Street, where he ended up.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
Anyway, but poor George, he just wasn't ready for that. And like I said, and everybody I've talked to that knows him has said they've never heard an outburst like this from him. He stood up and he said, "What the F is that?" So he didn't say F, but he just couldn't believe it. I mean, he was just blown away.
So was that in a good way?
Oh yeah, it was a good way.
Okay.
Oh yeah, he was just stunned.
Never heard anything.
Never heard anything like that.
Right.
So that's how what a great musician. In fact, Alan is by far the greatest musician I ever worked with, and not just guitar player, but musician.
Yeah.
So, and no, I don't play like him, and I don't know anybody else that does either.
Yeah.
I also worked with John McLaughlin, who was considered the world's greatest guitar player for many years.
Right.
A lot of people. And I told Alan one time, I said, yeah, I did the sound for Mahavishnu Orchestra twice with John McLaughlin. He said,
What-
he said, and Alan said, he's the master. And I said, no, you're the master. I thought he was, but I said, I can do a lot of the things he does. I don't even know what you're about.
Right. What was that orchestra you mentioned?
Mahavishnu Orchestra. Mahavishnu.
Mahavishnu.
Yes,
Okay.
Mahavishnu.
I try and catch these things early, so then when I'm trying to transcribe,
Right.
I
Yeah. Mahavishnu. Jan Hammer was the keyboard player. He did all the music
Yeah.
for the
Hammer.
Miami Vice soundtrack.
Oh,
That TV
yeah,
show.
yeah.
He did
Yeah.
all the music. I mean, he's
He did a lot of TV arrangements.
Yeah, he was Czechoslovakian, and he was a fabulous keyboard
Yeah.
player. He used to play at Jilly's all the time too.
Really?
Yeah. And Billy Cobham was the drummer, and he was phenomenal.
Yeah.
Just world class people. You couldn't find any better people.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
So that was Mahavishnu, but anyway, but that's and the last thing I'll say about Holdsworth is that he was voted like the greatest guitar player in the world 5 times by the readers of Guitar Player magazine, and those were all guitar players. It's like one time he said to me, he said, Gary, he said, I love you, but please don't sit right in front of me. He said, it makes me nervous when a great guitar player sits in front of me. He actually said it to me.
Really?
And I said, well, then we might as well tell everybody to go home because there's 300 guitar players out there waiting to hear you.
It's funny, well, because it sounds like he's someone that guitarists just revere, but
Yes.
the casual music fan might not know about him at all.
He asked me one time. He says Eddie wants me to go, and he's talking about Eddie Van Halen, who was a big fan. In fact, he got Alan a contract with Warner Brothers. He took Ted Templeman out to hear him, and he said, "Oh yeah, he's super accomplished." So he got him to sign with Warner Brothers, but that lasted one album because Ted Templeman was a producer. He had produced, I think he produced the Doobie Brothers originally, and a lot of stuff like that. And then he produced Van Halen all those years. And he would tell Alan, he would say, okay, just do 12 bars of guitar and then back to the vocal, and well, you can't, a virtuoso, you can't really tell them how to play.
Right.
Yeah, that doesn't work because
Right.
they don't like that.
Right.
It's like, Alan asked me, he says, how would you produce me? And he said, I know you're a producer. He said, how would you do it? And I said, I'd take my Neumann U87, I'd put it about 5 feet away from your amp, and I'd put in an SM81 Shure or whatever I was using at the time, up close on your cabinet, and I'd say, play.
Whatever.
I wouldn't say play 12 bars or play. And I understand Ted Templeman wanted to sell records.
Yeah.
He wanted to sell recordings. I get it, but you can't do that with somebody that accomplished. You just have to let them go and just try to make it work as far as a commercial thing. They hated each other. They had one album and they were done with each other. But that's what I'm getting at. So, but Eddie always talked about he always talked about that Alan was a master. So did Joe Satriani, and so did so many of the great guitar players. Eric Johnson, another great guitar player.
Yeah.
But really, all these guys thought he was the guy. So when 40,000 people voted for him as the greatest guitar player.
Well, and just by mentioning some of those names, you get a real kind of idea of what
Neil Schoen.
Neil
Schoen said, when I get too cocky about my guitar playing, I go listen to Alan Holdsworth.
Yeah.
He said that puts me in my place.
But it gives you a real good idea of the style of guitarist that he must be. When talking about some of these artists and the type of music they play, and you talk about the energy
right.
But God, producing must be such a delicate balance there. You talk about the musician and the artist on the one hand, and then and then the production side of it on the other hand.
Well,
And when do you just,
right.
you know,
I used to when I was 25, I had guys saying, he's a good musician, but his head's messed up with selling all the time. With commercialism, that's all he cares about. Well, I was trying to make a living at it.
yeah.
So I didn't look at it that way. I was like, Jason Hollander, that was one of those two jazz guitar players I said that taught me, and was a very fine virtuoso guitar player.
Yeah.
He said, I've heard people say Gary Hill's, messed up with commercialism. He said, if I were you, I'd laugh all the way to the bank.
Yeah.
But
yeah.
Of course, I never made millions of dollars or anything, but I had some good runs. So.
Well, it certainly sounds like from a very young age you were always very interested in what makes a good song,
Oh,
And
fortunately, because I was listening to Elvis and Ricky and the Ventures and then the Beatles and then the Byrds and then the Yardbirds and blah blah blah, I had good influence. Simon and Garfunkel too. Paul Simon was a major influence on me, and then after I studied all their records real big time, and then I went with one of my groups to Columbia in New York, where they recorded much of that stuff, and I actually got to work with the same people.
Really?
And so I got to put some of those. It kind of opened up some of the dark places, that I didn't understand. Like
right.
Filled in the holes, I guess you should say. So, yeah, I learned a lot from being. I was at CBS for like a week and recording. And nothing ever came out of that, but.
Why did you go up there initially?
We were. I was signed as a songwriter with a couple of producers out of New York.
Okay.
And that happened through like a local Jerry Kay, a local WING disc jockey, and then became program director there. And he recommended us to those guys. And, I think they said we're looking for talent. And,
Yeah.
That's how that went. I had a good relationship with those people for years. We recorded when I was 16. I recorded at Capitol with them. 16. I was still 16 when I recorded.
Really?
So that was Captain Crunch McGriff.
So things happen quickly.
Yeah.
This all goes back to your
I remember
your first gig out in Centerville that you were talking about on Mad River.
Oh yeah. Well, I was one of the early gigs. Yeah. But.
And you said the house you played.
Yeah, that was out. So that came. Yeah, that came after that. So it definitely came after that. But that was like that recording helped us get our foot in the door. Like with those people too, because they heard that. They got to hear that. We had that recording, and they thought, well, yeah, they've got some talent.
Yeah.
And it was an audition at Capitol. That's what they got us. And so we. The only thing was that we were so young, we didn't know any better. We played a gig on Sunday night at Immaculate Conception Church, and we put the stuff in the drummer's '56 Chevy, and put all the equipment in a trailer pulled behind that '56 Chevy. And there was 4 guys in the band, and we took this other guy who was a real talented guy that was kind of. We wanted him to be in the band. He wasn't officially in the band yet, but he was a better musician than any of us, actually. But so we had 5 people in that '56 Chevy, and we drove the 9 hours or 11 hours it took to get to New York, and we got there at like 4 o'clock in the afternoon. They put us in our hotel room, and we put our clothes down on the bed, and threw some water in our eyes and went right into Capitol at 5 o'clock in the late afternoon there, and had to pull that together. And that's one reason why we didn't get a deal. I've always felt
you were tired, right?
We were just wore out.
Yeah.
But he's because the head of A&R at Capitol was actually there to see us, and it was like $1 million contract that was waiting there for us. So we were 16. That was like a dream come true. Even when they called us and said what company it was, and the band was practicing at the time, and I got off the phone and I just said capital. Everybody in the room just erupted. You
Yeah,
know, it's just
yeah.
like we'd won the lotto or something. But you got to do it. You got to do it. It's just like an NFL player that shows promise in college, but he gets there and it's like, yeah, I'm not quite there.
weren't quite there.
No.
So
Now,
what,
the head of A&R says, he says, it's just not coming together. He says, the bass player and the drummer are all over the place. He said, just play the song for me on your guitar and sing it for me. And we did that. And he goes, I like your voice. He said, I like the songs a lot. He says, but if we don't get something real soon, we're all going home tonight.
yeah,
And we won't be back. And that's the way it went.
and that's what happened.
Yeah, that's what happened.
But that led to you being hired by CBS.
Yeah, well, indirectly, because I
Indirectly.
was still with those producers that got us in that door, and they still liked my writing and stuff like that, and so.
So you got their attention.
I was 23 when I went back to
Okay.
when I went to CBS.
Okay.
So it was a different.
So you
different
went,
band.
you went, you took your shot,
Right.
and then you came back with your tail between your legs, or
Right. Yeah. Pretty much. But I learned a lot because I realized. Yeah,
What it takes.
Yeah, you gotta realize at least I had a better idea of what.
Yeah.
You know, and I knew then that the bass player and the drummer had to be tighter, and not that we were that tight, but that's what he said. I'm just going by what the guy said. You know, he said what you guys are doing okay, but these guys are all over the place.
Yeah.
They're all over the map with it. So. I'm just-
well, you got to take your shot, and
Right.
and then you got to get the honest evaluation of where you were at.
Right. So then we.
Did you go back to square one, or?
Well, then we formed a new band with better people, and somewhere in there, 1970, I worked with a band, so I was 18 then.
Was that the end of Captain Crunch?
Yeah, after Captain Crunch. And I worked with this band called the East Orange Express from Cincinnati, and I was the youngest one in the band. East Orange Express.
East Orange Express. Okay.
And they called me and they said, well, a mutual friend of ours has recommended you, and we need a lead guitar player. So I said, didn't I just see you guys at Cincinnati Gardens open up for Three Dog Night and the Birds? And they said, yeah. And so I knew there was an opportunity.
you have my attention.
Yes,
right?
yeah. So I went down and they hired me, but I was the youngest one in the band, and
Guitar player.
pretty naive, and they were they were all older, and everybody was smoking dopes, and et cetera, and that wasn't my thing. So I didn't have enough of interest, but I was still learning in spite of that, and they were pros. They were playing concerts, and they had a deal going with I can't remember the guy's name, but he produced the na 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 hey, hey good.
Right.
That guy. Now Steam was the name of the band, but I can't remember the producer's name. I think he also produced Harry Chapin. And I mentioned that because Harry Chapin was one we worked for Harry Chapin. We opened for him here at Wright State.
Really?
Yeah, there was 2,000 people there.
Yeah, I remember seeing in one of the old campus newspapers when he came.
Yeah.
And you opened for what band were you when you opened?
That was Blue Max.
Blue Max.
Yeah. I kind of skipped around. Okay, so East Orange Express in Cincinnati, they were the top paid local band in Cincinnati.
Okay.
They played 5 times a week, and that was just to me. And I said,
just around town.
How much do you?
Cincinnati.
Yeah, around northern Kentucky, etc. They'd play at Earlham College. They'd play, Erlanger High School or whatever that's called. And actually, there was no Erlanger. That's another story. But
That's right.
because the song we ended up I ended up recording a song that we did in the Eastern Express much later. I didn't record it until '77, but it made it to number 5 locally here in town. And it was called Cincinnati.
And you wrote that when you were
I
playing
didn't,
with
I
them?
didn't write it, no.
Okay.
I just performed it and produced it.
Okay.
And, but the guy from Ivan and the Sabres, his name escapes me right this second, but he wrote, must have it. Anyway, he wrote the song, and he was a keyboard player in the East Orange Express.
Okay.
And because they were older pros, and then they could sing and blah blah blah. They ended up working out a thing where the Lemon Pipers were kind of on their way down a little bit after Green Tambourine, etc.
Mm-hmm.
And they started doing gigs with, as the Lemon Pipers and as Eastern Express. But that was after I was out of the band. So, but I can see that guy's face, but I can't picture his name.
So East Orange Express wasn't quite your thing, but how long did you
And
play
I was
with them?
and I was driving back and forth, and I was taking
Yeah.
away from my girlfriend, and I was actually I was going to Sinclair, and then they had a co-op thing, so I'd go one quarter, and then I took off
Mhm.
next quarter to play with those guys, and they were young. I mean, they were older than me, and I was younger, and I just didn't really realize what I had, and so they. After I didn't show up for practice a few times, they fired me, and I said, okay, I learned my lesson. I'm going to take it more serious now. And that was the turning point.
Was that?
Yeah, it was, because I knew those guys were really good, and I had blown a real opportunity there.
So in your co-op program, what were you studying at Sinclair?
The East Orange Express. One last thing about
Uh-huh.
that is that the bass player and the drummer, Mike Riley and Billy Hines, went on to form Pure Prairie.
Really?
Yes.
Wow.
So
Well, yeah, and you gave me this handout. It's an impressive list of connections that you've had, for sure.
yeah, and there's even more that aren't even on there. Like stuff like Ron Riddle was a great local drummer,
Mhm.
and he went on. And he was in the very first Blue Max band, and that I put together in '69.
Mhm.
And he went on to play 10 years with Blue Oyster Cult, and then he played with Stu Ham, who was, and he quit Blue Oyster Cult to play with Stu Ham, which financially wasn't smart.
Wasn't the smartest move.
No. Because he was treated like a rock star. He'd go in, and the roadie would have his drums set up and tuned and mic'd up, and all he would do is just play,
Yeah,
and make good money. doing it.
they were pretty huge.
Yeah, and even later, even if you called them, and you could call them a has-been band, but they were still a good band, and they were still making big money. They were still selling out, Bogarts in Cincinnati. I went to see them down there.
Yeah.
And way after the fact, and because he said, hey, he called me up and said, come down and see us. And I said, sure, and and he was the best. Ron Riddle, he had gone to Berkeley, I think,
Was that the one that was the roommate with who's the drummer, the woman who was in the Story Circle?
Janet Ogg.
Yeah.
Oh,
yeah.
probably.
I think she
I
was.
think a lot of people,
Yeah.
were influenced by Ron. He wasn't a great band drummer in the beginning, but we brought him in for a session later on. And I told him, I loved Ron, but I said, I got to tell you, I said, you're gonna have to get a stronger groove going. And, you're gonna have to be more locked in on your time.
Right.
I said, you're the best soloist I've ever heard, and I've heard a lot of bands in concert. I used to go see Emerson, Lake Palmer, and all these great drum soloists. None of them could touch him.
Yeah.
He was he'd go on for a half hour if you'd let him,
Right, well,
He'd
most
never be the
drummers
same
would.
lick twice. So,
Right,
yeah.
right.
Oh, I mean, he was just phenomenal, and he did, and he knew he could do all the finger sticking that Buddy Rich could do and all those things. I mean, he was technically incredible, but he just hadn't played with enough good bands with a great rhythm section, you know.
Right.
So he you know, years later he thanked me and he said, if it wasn't for you and another producer I worked with telling me that I needed to get my time together, he said, I never would have played with Blue Oyster Cult or any of those bands.
Yeah.
So sometimes it pays to tell the truth.
Right.
Even though you take a chance on losing a friendship.
Right, but you know, they appreciate having the guts to actually tell them that maybe other people, you know, were afraid to tell them. Yeah.
So, and he worked with some great.
And he left Blue Oyster Cult and
he joined Stu Hamm, who was a bass player from Joe Satriani's bass player, and so he would, and they had a new band, and so he looked at it like, well, now maybe I can get a recording contract because nobody's gonna sign Blue Oyster Cult, hardly, you know, because it's already been there, you know. But it never, if it doesn't take off, and then suddenly he's not making those big paychecks that he's making for all those concerts, you know, and with Blue Oyster Cult. So, but he was so talented, Ron was so talented that he started doing soundtracks for cable television like the History Channel and Discovery Channel and things like that. He's done over 180 of those now.
Probably pretty good work.
Yeah. And he was that talented, so he was just saying.
Yeah.
But anyway.
That's interesting. So let me see. So you kind of talked about this a little bit. You weren't just always into rock and blues. Your taste, and you talked about Simon and Garfunkel and starting to learn, interested in jazz and other kinds of.
Yeah, and one time we got a review in the paper, and actually it was a review on another band, and they said, "What made you decide to use an acoustic guitar in a rock band?" You know. And the guy said, because I saw Gary Hill in concert and with his band, and he played the acoustic, and he showed me that we could do it, and I just learned it from watching the Moody Blues or watching somebody, we all learned from everybody else. So.
Right.
But it was nice to remember that, and it had that influence on it.
Yeah.
So I always the Moody Blues were an early influence on me too. So but definitely Paul Simon, and then when he came out, James Taylor was a major influence. It made me working up those finger picking styles made me a better all around player.
Yeah.
And different kinds of music. Yeah. And the Beatles too. I mean, the Beatles used a lot of acoustics, So I guess that was already there.
Yeah. So you were with Captain Crunch, and
then the next big one was after East Orange Express anyway. Was Blue Max.
Blue Max. How long was?
Well, there was a Blue Max in 1969 with Ron Riddle and some great musicians in it, but that one never really did much. We just kind of sat in town and rehearsed and played a few times, and then we went on from there and went our separate ways. But I'd say it was 71 probably that we really got going with Blue Max, and we did that till probably 79. So the
really?
70s, yeah. So it was Blue Max that.
So that's when you kind of really hit your stride a little bit.
Yeah. We opened for Aerosmith at the Palace Theater, and we did the sound for the Eagles at the Victory, and the sound for the Eagles at the Reflections in Cincinnati, and we opened both shows too. So we did the sound. The thing
wasn't that one like the same day or something like that?
No, it was 2 weeks. 2 weeks.
2 weeks apart.
Yeah.
Somebody mentioned that and said they thought it was the same.
No.
That was one of the first times they were really coming out, right?
Well, it was. They only had the first album out, and they, even though David Geffen had put $300,000 in promotional money behind them, and was, you knew they were going to be a super group because of those vocals. They just had that great vocal style.
Right,
And,
right.
But they had never headlined before. Before that tour, that we worked 2 of the shows with them on, they had never headlined. They had opened up for 10 years after. They'd opened up for Black
Yeah.
Arkansas, bands that would never
Right.
get as big as them.